Dr. C. Wright Mills' The Power Elite is a seminal work in sociology and political theory that investigates the structure of power in mid-20th century America. Published in 1956, the book remains one of the most influential critiques of the concentration of power in a democratic society. Mills argues that power in the United States is concentrated in the hands of a small, interlocking group of elites who dominate the military, corporate, and political spheres. This analysis challenges the notion of American democracy as an egalitarian system governed by the will of the people. Instead, Mills portrays a society where decisions of national and global significance are made by a narrow circle of influential individuals. This essay explores the core arguments of Mills' work, its historical context, key themes, and its enduring relevance in contemporary society. The mid-20th century was a period of profound social and political transformation in the United States. The post-World War II era brought unprecedented economic growth, technological innovation, and the rise of the United States as a global superpower. At the same time, the Cold War intensified military spending and foreign intervention, shaping national priorities and governance. American society also witnessed the growth of large corporations, bureaucratic organizations, and an increasingly complex political system. Against this backdrop, C. Wright Mills sought to understand who truly held power in the United States and how they used it. The 1950s were characterized by a growing disconnect between the ideals of democracy and the reality of concentrated power. While American political rhetoric emphasized equality, participation, and freedom, Mills observed that power was becoming increasingly centralized in a triad of key institutions: the military, the corporate sector, and the political apparatus. This power elite, as Mills termed it, operated largely outside the democratic process, insulated from public accountability and oversight. The triad of power: military, corporate, and political elites. One of the central arguments of the power elite is that American society is dominated by three interwoven institutions: the military, corporations, and political leadership. Mills argues that the leaders of these sectors are not isolated figures, but members of a cohesive elite network with overlapping interests, shared social backgrounds, and interconnected personal ties. 1. Corporate elites. In the era of post-war capitalism, large corporations became dominant economic forces. Mills describes corporate leaders as key players in shaping not only economic policies, but also national priorities. These executives wield influence over the lives of millions of workers and consumers, and their decisions often have geopolitical implications. 2. Political elites. The political sphere, particularly the executive branch of the U.S. government, became increasingly centralized in the mid-20th century. Mills notes that elected officials often rely on corporate leaders and military experts for advice, further blurring the lines between these spheres of power. Political leaders are often drawn from the same socioeconomic class as corporate and military elites, sharing similar worldviews and priorities. 3. Military elites. The rise of the military-industrial complex fundamentally altered the balance of power in American society. During the Cold War, military leaders gained unprecedented influence over policy and spending. Mills argues that military priorities began to overshadow other social concerns, leading to a permanent war economy and a focus on security above all else. Mills asserts that these three groups form an interlocking directorate where power is concentrated in the hands of a relatively small number of individuals who share similar educational backgrounds, social networks, and ideological commitments. These elites often move seamlessly between corporate boardrooms, government positions, and military leadership roles, reinforcing their collective dominance. Mass society and the decline of democratic participation. A key theme in the power elite is the erosion of meaningful democratic participation. Mills argues that ordinary citizens have become increasingly passive and disconnected from political power. In his analysis, the masses are largely spectators rather than active participants in the democratic process. This passivity, Mills suggests, is reinforced by mass media, consumer culture, and the overwhelming complexity of modern governance. Mills describes the emergence of a mass society, characterized by alienation, apathy, and political disengagement. While democracy theoretically provides citizens with the means to influence policy and hold leaders accountable, Mills observes that real power is exercised by elites operating behind closed doors. The masses, in contrast, are often manipulated through propaganda and spectacle rather than being genuinely informed or empowered. The role of ideology and legitimacy. Mills explores how the power elite maintain their legitimacy and control over society. One key mechanism is ideology, particularly the widespread belief in the fairness and meritocracy of American democracy. The power elite justify their dominance through narratives that frame their authority as both natural and necessary. For example, corporate leaders present themselves as job creators and economic stewards, military leaders as protectors of national security, and politicians as representatives of the people's will. Additionally, Mills highlights the role of education and cultural institutions in perpetuating elite power. Prestigious universities, think tanks, and media outlets often serve as breeding grounds for elite values and ideologies. By controlling access to these institutions, the power elite ensure the reproduction of their dominance across generations. Critiques of Mills's thesis. While the power elite has been widely influential, it has also faced criticism. Some scholars argue that Mills overstates the cohesion of the power elite and underestimates the internal conflicts and competition within and between the military, corporate, and political spheres. Others suggest that Mills underappreciates the potential for grassroots activism and social movements to challenge elite power. Furthermore, critics argue that Mills' portrayal of the masses as passive and manipulated risks being overly deterministic. While voter apathy and political disengagement are real issues, history has shown that mass movements from the civil rights movement to anti-war protests can disrupt elite control and bring about meaningful change. The enduring relevance of the power elite. Despite these critiques, the power elite remains profoundly relevant in the 21st century. Many of Mills' observations have only intensified in the age of globalization, digital surveillance, and financial capitalism. The concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few corporate giants, the influence of military contractors on foreign policy, and the blurring of lines between public and private sectors echo Mills' analysis. In contemporary America, the revolving door between Wall Street, the Pentagon, and political leadership remains firmly in place. The rise of tech monopolies, the growing influence of lobbyists, and the role of money in politics have further entrenched elite power. Additionally, mass media, now amplified by social media, continues to shape public opinion in ways that often align with elite interests. C. Wright Mills. The power elite offers a powerful critique of the concentration of power in American society and the erosion of democratic ideals. By identifying the interconnected networks of corporate, political, and military elites, Mills sheds light on the mechanisms through which power is maintained and reproduced. While some of his arguments have been challenged, the central thesis of the power elite remains strikingly relevant in understanding contemporary issues of inequality, governance, and democracy. In an era marked by growing disparities in wealth and political influence, Mills's work serves as both a warning and a call to action. It challenges citizens to critically examine who holds power, how it is exercised, and what can be done to create a more democratic and accountable society. For anyone seeking to understand the dynamics of power in the modern world, The Power Elite remains an indispensable text.